Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people. I am really, really pleased to have this lady here with us today. I want to introduce you to the lovely Mel Riley. I'm going to get her to introduce yourself to the audience in a minute, but I want to tell you a very quick story how I came across Mel. So I love interviews like that, and I truly hope you will enjoy it as much as I do, because I hardly know anything about Mel. Usually I know so much more about my guests. Yet I came across one of your stories, Mel, on LinkedIn, and it really touched me so deeply. And I was incredibly inspired by your story, where you have come from, what you have made out of it, and the message that you now bring into the world. And what we do here is really inspire people that are in their healing journey. So I think you are such a perfect match. Would you do me the honor to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Marie. Yes, my name's Mel Riley. I'm a playful character that loves photography. I'm sporty. I love hats. I'm a mad hatter, and I often say in my spare time I'm an adult child and family therapist. I always introduce myself that way around because I think we're far more than just our job titles. And so when I meet people, they often say, what do you do? And I'm like, well, who am I is more important than what I do, although that is also very close to my heart.
I love it.
So yeah, I'm an adult child family therapist and playful little character that bounces around, trying to inspire other people to be themselves, to step into their vulnerability, to show up and to reach their full potential, whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah. I think you do so much more than just trying, like just by the story I read on LinkedIn. It was so inspiring, truly. So to bring our audience up to speed, really, the story that I read took you from being homeless into now doing something really, really incredible. You do trauma therapy. You offer so much to the world, and I'd really love to unpack this story a little bit more for our audience, because I hardly know you. Just from what I read, I was so inspired. So would you mind taking us back to that, and really how did this come about that you ended up living on the streets? And then, of course, we'd love to talk a little bit further. How did you come out and do what you do today?
I came from a home that was physically and emotionally abusive, and so one day there was just this great big argument. My parents were arguing, and it was around me basically. And I was 16, probably coming 17, and I just had enough. I just knew that if I stayed in this home, I was quite possibly going to either die, or there was just nothing there was nothing here. This is quite painful. I haven't really talked about it much apart from in therapy. So it's a long way back. I'm 50 next month. And so I walked out. I just walked out. I got a taxi. In the clothes that I stood up, I walked out. I think the painful bit is I left a sister behind that I didn't take with me. And so I walked out. She's my twin sister, so I left an older sister I didn't have a great relationship with, and a twin sister behind. And probably anyone who's listened to this, who knows me, many will know, oh, we didn't know you had a twin. I don't necessarily talk about my close sibling. And so I left home. I walked out in the clothes that I stood up in. It wasn't really planned. There wasn't a plan. I've always thought myself to be not the most brave or courageous of people, but as I'm starting to look back, I'm starting to realize that that's not the case at all. It was, I think, rather huge to do, and I wasn't really old enough to be in the world on my own at that age. So I had a job. I left school without any qualifications and got work. And so I just went to work. I went to work, and I went to work I wasn't on the streets for very long. I rode the night buses because they were warm. And I was waiting at the bus stop after work for the bus. Well, I wasn't waiting for the bus, actually. I didn't have any money for the bus, so I was just really stood at the bus stop waiting for the people to leave the huge office block that I worked in. And so I stood at the bus stop, But I think the boss I had at the time was a lovely lady. I think she'd noticed that I was not as fresh and clean as I probably normally was. And so she pulled up at the bus stop and said to me, you know, do you want a lift? And I was like insistent that I didn't need a lift. The bus would be here in a minute. And so she quite forcefully said, you know, it's okay, I can give you a lift, get in. And I was like, it's okay, the bus will be here in a minute. And then she just kind of just pulled power really and said, get in the car. And then I got in the car and she said, what's going on? And I told her that I'd left home. I couldn't be there anymore. And she took me home with her. And I slept on the sofa for quite a while. They had to field my calls at work because my parents hadn't taken my leaving very well and they were being quite abusive. So they fielded the calls. And she helped me. I slept on the sofa for quite a while, and then she helped me find my first kind of bedsit flat, which took most of my rent money. My salary wasn't very big, so I lived on like £10 a week, which wasn't easy back then. I can remember having cold showers because there was no money to put in the kind of electricity meter. I went without food. I would walk to work. And so those times were pretty hard. So they all give me an empathy of people's, you know, now I have a comfortable life. And so I have an empathy for what it's like to not have a pound to your name, and to live.
I can only imagine. And Mel, poverty. If I could just interrupt you here for a moment, you know, I can't even begin to imagine what that would be like, and how beautiful that would have been, that she really followed her intuition and said, no, you're coming in a car with me, and took you in. This is really, really beautiful. I just wanted to know, like, in that whole time when you were away from home and you said your parents didn't react quite well, were you in touch with your sisters at all, in particular with your twin sister? You know, most people know what an extreme bond that really means, having a twin brother or sister. So were you in touch? Did you let them know? At what stage did you let them know that you were gone and didn't intend to come back?
She would, it was a time way before mobile phones existed. So whilst there was a little time we didn't see each other, but she would phone me from the phone box. And so we did stay in contact, and she stayed in the family home longer than myself. And then eventually we both actually left fairly early. So she left a little bit later, and so we were able to kind of have contact without kind of worrying about what the parents would do or say. So we were in contact by phone, and as soon as I got my bed sit, she was able to come over and visit. So it was temporarily, but I regret not taking her with me, but it was never planned. It was just I guess a survival move. Survival move. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so my boss helped me get on my feet with my first flat. She put an email out to the whole office block to ask if anybody had anything, because I didn't have anything for my flat. So you know, people donated lampshades, and I had a coffee table for many years that a guy named Barry gave me from accounts, and a lovely lady made me some curtains filling up at the...
Oh God, I can sort of feel I actually had goosebumps just when you said that. You know, you had a coffee table for so many years, and I think everybody would be able to relate, or not, maybe not relate, but really understand how much that means when you've got nothing and you make that survival move. You know, just to get out of something. So
I think kindness can be overwhelming, particularly when you've not had massive amounts of it. So I'm very grateful to my one of my first bosses. She also, we had squash courts at the place where we worked, and so she was a county squash player, so she taught me to play squash, and I'm still playing now. I'm playing, you know, anybody knows me know I'm a bit squash obsessed. At 49, I'm still racing around the squash courts like a lunatic. So she, yeah,
That's beautiful.
she left me with a legacy of loving squash.
Mm.
And that the bedsit also has its own traumas, because I was asleep one night and I heard somebody banging on the front door, and I had a partner at the time who was like, "Are you sure you didn't dream it or imagine it?" And I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure there was somebody hammering on the front door in the night, but I didn't open it." And then a few weeks later, I came home to my flat to find the window smashed and the curtain blowing out of the window. And they locked I couldn't get in. They'd locked the front door, so we had to clear the glass and go in through the window. But I'd been burgled, and I didn't have very much, but they took what I did have. It wasn't in the greatest of areas. I wouldn't be forced out. I can be stubborn, which I've now kind of reframed as determined, but I wouldn't move out. And then sadly, about 12 weeks later, I was asleep one night and I heard the squeak of a door at 2 a.m. in the morning, and there were intruders in my flat. And so I could.
And you were on your own.
I was on my own. I couldn't get out way before mobile phone, so I just literally had to sit and wait it out. And at one point, I could hear the person breathing on the other side of the door. And so and so I waited until it went quiet, and then I set my alarm clock off really loud so that so that whoever was in the flat knew that there was somebody there, because I don't think they knew. They'd ripped the medicine cabinet off the bathroom and tipped it into the shower, and later the police told me that they thought the person that had come had a key. It was a previous tenant. They don't think the locks had been changed, and they think that person was looking for money and drugs. And so I left that flat and then went to live with a partner in the town that I'm now still in. His parents.
How old were you at that stage?
I was probably about 19, and I left 18, 19. So I left. He literally just came and got me, and I ended up. His parents came home from their holiday to find me living in their spare room, and I lived there for quite a while until I bought a house with that partner. So I got married. We bought a house. I'm still in the house.
So they obviously took you in, not just in their home, but in their house.
Yeah, and I think it's quite common that people who, when you don't have that kind of family structure at home, you end up in a relationship with a family unit around you that can be quite stable and supportive. Sadly, that relationship started to break down. I have had a tendency to be drawn to people who were quite workaholics, shall we say. And I have that tendency too. I think we all have something that we maybe plow into. If something, people, it might be alcohol or drugs. Mine was, I think, work. Work was one of the kind of sanctuaries for me of throwing myself into things. So I got married, I got divorced. That was a very difficult time, and I lost the family unit that I was in and became quite unstable. And
can I just ask for the age, just so we can follow your timeline roughly? So how old were you when you got married?
I was 21 when I got married, way too young. I didn't even know who I was. And I was about 20. We were together about 8 years. I think I was about 23, 24 when we got when we got divorced. So kind of a young adult. And I didn't cope very well at all. I kind of the darkness just appeared, and I think I'm aware much later on from my studies of having a really insecure attachment, that being fairly on my own. I wasn't massively in contact with my sister around this time, and I ended up overdosing, but didn't do particularly well, thankfully. And so I ended up having to call my own ambulance because I was just in incredible pain. And so I ended up in psychiatric hospital for a little while, with pretty much a breakdown. That's the only way I can describe it. And so hence that was my probably first trip into therapy. Remember being held by a therapist who
So that was in your mid-20s, yeah?
Yeah, who helped me until I was able to kind of pick up the pieces of being on my own, and was on my own for quite a while, and hopping jobs, chasing salaries, more money meant better quality of life. And then I burnt out again. Well, I think it was probably always inevitable that not good enough stuff drives you to overcompensate and overwork. And I hopped from job to job, and then around about 30, I was driving to work one day, and I just started crying, and my hands started shaking, and I couldn't drive the car. I just had to call my partner to come and get me. I got a new partner at this time, and I remember going to see a tutor, and she was like, "Don't worry about your studies, just go home. And your health is more important." And I think my whole nervous system had just fizzed completely. And again, it was a bit of a road to recovery. And I decided at 28, the pull was there, that I was depressed, I was fed up, I didn't see any point in the work I was doing. I always had this sense that there has to be more to life than this. I've heard the story so many times in other people's kind of stories of moving forward, that that this wasn't where I'm supposed to be. I felt imprisoned behind. I was in office jobs. It was behind the desk, and that wasn't where I needed to be. And I was fortunate to be supported by my partner, and I had a couple of housemates, because I couldn't afford the mortgage on my place, so I'd had housemates in. So financially, I had a little bit of a safety net. I spoke to the bank and asked if I could not pay my mortgage for a couple of months, and I did something that I'd always wanted. I did something.
I think not just financially, but also so you could have a break for yourself and look
just
after
a breather
yourself.
from life. One really needed to hit the pause button. And so with my partner's support, he looked after my dog for me. And I did something that I'd never been able to do. I'd worked every day since I was 16, and so I took a little career break for 3 months, and I went to Sri Lanka. And I volunteered as an elephant handler.
Oh my God, I did not know that about you at all. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't know.
There'll be lots of people, there'll be a lot of things in this story that people won't know about me. I went to Sri Lanka and to work with elephants, and did some teaching in the temple schools. And I always remember being really excited about going, and 3 months in the sun, it's going to be amazing. But what I hadn't really kind of got yet was attachments, and so I almost never went. I had this almighty panic attack at the airport where I can't do this, I can't go. All my safety, my partner and my dog and my home were going to be miles away, and I almost never got on the plane. And my partner, who's very supportive, said to me, "Go, you can always come back. It doesn't matter if you come back next week, but if you don't go, you'll always regret it." So I did go, and I had an amazing time.
That's incredible. That's really beautiful that he supported you with that.
And I had time to reflect and think about, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't want to be in this corporate world. I just had a sense that I wasn't going back. Wasn't going back to that corporate world. And it was a time where the job market was buoyant. There's plenty of jobs around, a lot more jobs than there appears to be now. And so I came back, and I just got a temp job. I worked for a company recruiting staff for a train company. And so I was answering the phones. And, I have this kind of, it's weird, but I have this kind of, I don't have a religious faith, but I just kind of have a faith in the universe. Kind of sometimes the stars align, synchronicity. I don't know what we want to call it. But one day this person rang asking for an application form, and it was a company name I'd never heard of. So I just asked, what do you do? And they said, we help people get jobs who are unemployed. And I just thought, I could do that. I'm really good at getting jobs. I get all the jobs I go for. And so I wrote to them and said, can I come work for you? And they wrote, and they called me and said, come in and let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
And they were like, are you for real? Because this is like half your salary and you're sat here in your expensive suit. I'd managed to get into a really quite corporate, even though I didn't have many qualifications, my business experience had meant that I'd been able to get into jobs that normally only graduates get into. And I'm pleased to say, as a female, and we know about equality, that I actually somebody left the print on the printer all the salaries for my department, and of all the people in my department, it was IT, so I was the only female. I was paid more than all the males, and I was like, oh my god, I've got a salary that's bigger than all the males here.
That would have been a proper boost for you. That's really beautiful. You know, after you from where you come from and how you've always been chasing the higher and better pay and to create a better life for yourself, and then to find that must have been quite a satisfaction.
I remember when they hired me and they were like, what salary do you want? And so I just kind of plucked a number and gave it them, and they said yes. And I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I was kind of financially, I was kind of getting better, kind of funding my life. But then I decided that it didn't matter. You know, I was at a point where it was like, well, there will be some hard times as I quit my 9-to-5 job, but I had a sense that I was working towards something else. I didn't really know what that was. I had no idea of what my career plan was going to be. I wrote on a piece of paper, probably around that time, 29-30, that I wanted to work 4 days a week. I wanted to work from home. I didn't want to see my dog's guilt face when I left to get to. I got a bus and 2 trains to work. It used to take me an hour and a half to get to one of my jobs. It was just that long commute, long hours. Sometimes I'd be there till midnight, working on campaigns and projects that I was bullied by an account manager at the last corporate job I had. And so I just had this sense that working 4 days a week, working at home with my dog. I didn't want a bullying boss, and that was all I really had as my kind of my plan.
To the universe.
Yeah, my wish list, if you like. I didn't have what I wanted to do as a job. Anyway, I took the job. They offered me a place as a coach, employment coach, to work with long-term unemployed back into work. And what I noticed about all the people I work with, that they were often marginalized, they often had trauma histories, and they often had tough times, and so they often lacked confidence and self-esteem because of what they'd lived through. And so when you really nurture them and invest in them and believe in them, then great things started to happen. And we had people who had never had jobs get jobs, and we had and so I really enjoyed that job, and then I was there for about a year, and then I got headhunted to go and work as a mentor for somebody who was on maternity leave. Said to me, would you like my job? And that was working as a matching mentors and mentees for Connections, which is a youth service. And then from there,
I guess like also you know, when you think of how many jobs you've been in at that stage, and you know how you've worked yourself up in the career ladder and gained so much experience, that would have given you an incredible background for reading people's personality and seeing who really works with who.
I didn't realize, somebody once said to me, who saw my CV, said to me, oh, you'll never get anywhere because you never stay anywhere long enough. You're a job hopper, and you're one of these people that will never make it. And actually, as a therapist, we reframe all the time, and it stung a bit at the time. And I've had that said to me so many times, I've glossed over a whole childhood where I was thick and clumsy and stupid at home and at school. But actually, what I hadn't realized was working with all these different client groups, adults, teenagers. And then I went on to work in a prison with crack and heroin and alcohol users in the health team. And so I was working with all these different client groups, trying to find, I guess, my fit. I also worked as a youth worker. At one point, I had 5 jobs that made up my week. I was working way too much. And when people at one of the jobs I was working at, someone came into the bathroom while I was washing my hands, and she disclosed that she was being abused. And I really didn't know what to do or say, but I spent some time
at home or at work.
She was being abused at home, and I was at I was in the bathrooms at work, and one of the students that we were supporting, I was on one of the courses we were on, chose to disclose to me in the bathroom what was going on for her. And I just sat and listened and supported her. And we found some helpline numbers for her. But I felt really ill-equipped to deal with the disclosure. And then I thought, well, if I went on a counselling course, it would give me the skills. Maybe I naively thought it would teach me what to say in these moments. And actually what I realised, it doesn't teach you what to say, it teaches you how to be. And so I started my first counselling introductory course at the local college. And I've always hated studying. I'm not very good at writing. Well, I didn't think I was very good at writing.
What age was that roughly, just so we can follow your timeline?
I'd have been about 30, 28, late 20s, early 30s. And so I started this course while I was doing all these jobs. And I loved it. I loved the introductory course. It was all about humans. I guess it helped me start to make sense of my own history and why we do the things we do. And then I finished the 8-week course and then signed up for a year, I think it was a 2-year diploma. And I was completely overwhelmed by it and panicked. I was like, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. I hated school. I hated learning. And as the teacher was giving me all the modules, I could feel my heart rate going up. But I kind of I had to just shove it out the way and just go, let's just do this module. Let's get to half term and see if you can just do that. And that's how I got through it, with just one module half term, one module half term. I love it.
Step by step.
Yeah. And it's the penny hadn't still dropped. I always call myself the accidental therapist because the penny still hadn't dropped.
that would look nice on your business card. Accidental former therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it wasn't until we were refurbing our house that my partner said to me, well, you're training to be a therapist, you're going to need a room to see people in. And that I was like, oh yeah, I guess I am. I'm on this course getting skills to be a better youth worker, drugs worker, mentor. And I was on my way to somewhere that I didn't really know. So I qualified with the help of my partner, who sat up many nights with me doing my essays because I was really rubbish at them. I couldn't do them, and so he would sit with me through the night editing them all and getting them all ship shape, because every bloody full stop needs to be in the right place for academia. That's a whole nother rant we'll do another day. And so I qualified as a counsellor, and I worked at a voluntary sector place. And the pay was pants. Well, there wasn't any to start with, and then it was really low. And I worked out really quickly that if I wanted to be if I wanted to earn a salary and kind of go back to being able to shop and buy a pair of jeans at Next, then I couldn't stay in this place too long. And I remember telling my manager that I was leaving to set up a private practice, and she was like, are you sure you haven't been qualified that long? Make sure you don't run before you can walk. I said, well, it feels right. I'm going to give it a go. I kind of morphed over. I understand risk and safety thresholds emotionally and practically, and so I took a few clients while I had other jobs, and then the scales tipped to the point where I was expecting. I kind of set myself a goal to have 4 clients a week, and I ended up with 8. And they just kept coming, and so I ended up in private practice. That was 15 years ago. And that's allowed me to I bought my house very early, so I was able to pay it off. And so I'm no millionaire, but I'm comfortable, and I've had so many wonderful experiences. I said I love photography and wildlife, so I've been to see the orangutans in Borneo. I've photographed polar bears and tigers.
Have you been back to see the elephants in Sri Lanka?
I went to South Africa to see some elephants,
Beautiful. Where did you go to?
We went to Cape Town and then down onto the I can't remember the name. There's a big motorway that takes you down to Joburg, and we went a bit further down there. And so but yeah, I've been able to I've been really fortunate to be able to travel quite a lot. I love traveling. I've been over your way a couple of times to Australia too.
Let me know when you're here next time. I'd love to take you around and take you to some beautiful places for photography.
Thank you. I quit my prison job because I got an RSI in my elbow, and it just would not heal because of all the locks that I was opening and closing. And as I quit that job, before I got another one, I had a month and went over to Australia. We've got a relative over in the outback, so we came over we went over to visit her. So yeah, it's been a bit of a scenic route, if you like. I never really had an aim to work for myself or to be in self-employment, but I chose a career where there's not a massive amount of employed jobs. If you want to work, you kind of.
And it seems like the universe had other plans for you, or had plans for you. You know, it's really incredible. So you're still with that same partner now?
Yeah, we've been together. We just celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary. We've been together 23 years, and we met on New Year's Eve. And I worked with him in IT. Beautiful. We worked together for a little while. So yeah, he's been a massive. I wouldn't be here without him, because he's my number one fan and cheerleader. And as I said,
what's his name?
His name's Grant.
And so beautiful.
Yeah, he's some people think love is bunches of flowers and romantic trips out and things from the rom-com movies, but for me, love is patiently sitting through 9 years of studying. I went on to study play therapy and family therapy, my clinical supervision, and he's edited every essay. He signed up with me for a clinical doctorate, but I wanted to be Dr. Mel. But at the time I was going through, I actually had a really nasty professional complaint from somebody who wasn't very well, and there's lots of stalking and horrible stuff going on at the same time as my doctorate, and I wasn't enjoying the doctorate at all. I felt again overwhelmed. I felt like everybody else had got a JCB and I'd got a spoon, and I'd been asked to dig to France. And it wasn't till the disability awareness officer came in and said, if anybody is struggling, there's always one that gets missed. Then my heart started racing. And it wasn't, and I was like, what's that about? And I went to speak to her afterwards and said, I'm really struggling with this. And I was tested for dyslexia and dyspraxia. I asked for dyslexia testing, and the lady who came to see me said, are you clumsy? And I told her I've been in A&E 40 times with falls and trips and stuff. And she said, I'm going to test you for dyspraxia as well. And so at the age of 45, I got another upgrade of labels that I'm not thick and stupid. I'm actually neurodiverse. I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic.
I love that.
We took those labels off and put new ones on. So I'm actually a dyslexic and dyspraxic person, which explains a lot of why I'm all anally organized, but also kind of end up in small messes sometimes. And it's because I get dates and time. I can get dates and times mixed up. And so we work 10 times harder to just achieve normal, really.
I can only imagine. And I just want to take a moment here to thank you, like literally thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the things that you have shared with us, because many times you started something with I've never shared this before. Many of my friends wouldn't know this of me, and
Yeah.
I feel really honored that you share that here with us. And you know, also shout out to your beautiful partner, Grant, to be there with you the entire time and support you, because that to me is also what love is, you know, to support each other through whatever goals we have and through whatever trials and tribulations and, you know, things that we want to try out. And some of them work and some of them don't, but having somebody there with you to support you is really an absolute blessing and really, really beautiful. And I am absolutely certain that you did the same for him. So it's just really incredible.
I'm kind of really proud of the relationship, because I think it could have been because of what I was modeled to me in early life, to have a healthy relationship that where both people feel able to grow within that. I see so many unhealthy relationships in my work. So to have created something different from what I was raised in does feel kind of special. As I'm telling you this story, I'm slightly overwhelmed by my own story.
And so am I, because the thing is, you know, I said that from the beginning, I usually know people that come on camera with me a lot better than you. Yet something within your story touched me so deeply, and I was left so inspired that I just knew I had to come and take you in front of the camera. And I love that. And you know, we had a like 2-minute pre-chat. I said, let's unpack that in front of the camera. It gives it so much more spontaneity, and I really like that. And I feel really, really honored by what you're sharing with us and how much you have unpacked. Mel, if you're okay with that, I'd love to talk a little bit more about labels, because that is something that I very, very often talk about in my group, Loving Life After Loss, as well. Because, you know, first of all, there's this one label that most people in the group are widows, but there are also, you know, motherlings and other losses that are involved in the group. But to me personally, I could never, I could never fit that label of a widow. It was just not for me. And I knew when I became a widow, I was 45, and it felt so awkward for me to have to tick that box. And I literally had to tick that box maybe 2 or 3 times in my life for official purposes, you know. And I remember, actually also something that I don't think I've ever shared this on a public forum before, but when I had changed my relationship status, well, I didn't even change it. It happened. Like there was a story where it was gut-wrenching when it happened. I accidentally deleted the very post where I had announced on Facebook that Rob had passed, and there were over 2,000 comments at that stage, and there were about 200 to 400 that I hadn't read yet, because I remember marking them all for me to keep track of who I had read and responded to and who not. I really, truly wanted to keep it for later on for the boys to read when they're old enough to read all the comments that had come in. And I accidentally deleted a wrong post, which was the post that I really wanted to keep. So I went to Facebook and tried to recover it and all of that. They could not help me. But what they did instead, complete polar opposite of helping me, was they put Rob's account to memorial. I was not ready for that. It shocked me to the core that was taken off me, that choice when to do that, when I was ready to do that. And all of a sudden that changed my relationship status to widow. I had not chosen to do that. Facebook did that for me. I was absolutely gutted, and there was nothing I could do to revoke that, because once it's set to memorial, that's it. You know, there is no reviving people, so you can't change that. There is no option on Facebook to change that, so I was told. And here I was, for the first time in my life, I was confronted with that label, widow. I was like, confronted is probably a very, very soft-spoken choice of words compared to what I felt in that moment. And I just did not have the best experience with that, because you get the weirdest stalking messages from people when you're a widow at my age. And it was appalling, to say the least. So I literally changed my relationship status to single, and I struggled with that, because I thought it sort of negates that what was ever in my life. I don't like that either. So in a nutshell, for changing it a couple of times, I hit my relationship status because I thought it's nobody's business anyway. But this is something that I assume that you would have to deal with a lot as well, first in your personal life, but then also in your practice probably. And I like that you mentioned a few times the word reframing. You know, I often talk about changing perspectives. I love the word reframing because so often it really comes back to what our perspective is, because this includes our judgment of the situation in a positive and in a negative way. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on that, how you feel about labels and reframing?
First of all, I just want to say how sorry I am that that happened to you. I think timing is so important, and that grief is a letting go process that we all do in our own time. And so yours was brought forward when you weren't ready for it. And
it was 5 days after Rock Pass. Way too sudden. I was not ready to change
horrendous that. To be rushed and plunged into something that you haven't had time to kind of process. And I think timing is so important, isn't it? When I got my labels, first of all, I went I glossed over the fact that my first testing was done by a male psychologist who treated me like I had a brain injury, and he spoke to me like I was 10. Told me I couldn't be, he hadn't even finished the tests, and he told me that he gave me shared some of his opinions on me doing a doctorate, and that I could try and use some, he was just really patronizing, condescending, and I left there in tears because my first thing that I used to go to was I would collapse into shame when I was challenged or judged. And then actually sitting on a bench, I then got really angry, and I was like, no, you don't get to treat me like this, and you don't get to treat other people like this. So I actually put a complaint in and said he needs to go and have some more training. And what I've realized over the years is whatever people have called me or said about me, that I think there was always a very curious bouncy child in all of this that got squashed by abuse and trauma. And so actually it's almost like you're squashed down, and then you very slowly pop back up and into your full size. And whether it's labels, I felt angry and both sad for myself that these labels had taken so long to get. I felt a little bit stupid too, that, oh my God, it was so obvious. How did you miss it? But everybody's, and because I'm an avid reader and I've got loads of books, and I devour a novel in like 3 days, I'd be like, no, that's not you. And so everybody's dyspraxia is very unique to them. So I was both angry and upset by them, and actually it's almost like I shared a post the other day about something, and I'm often called bonkers but she's bonkers but brilliant, and it's taken a long time to own, I think, that those labels of actually brilliant, and I'm playful and a bit daft at times, and I'm often underestimated, and it used to bug me, but now it amuses me. Because actually people are, I'm prolific on LinkedIn. I'm a little bit of a LinkedIn addict at times, and sometimes people challenge me before I would collapse, and now I'm like, actually no, I'll stand my ground. I won't be bullied. And so those labels, I think
this is what happens when you outgrow the labels.
When you outgrow the labels, when you were talking about your status of widow, I was thinking back to my divorce and the shame I felt around being a divorced person and not married anymore. So shame, I think, is something that we don't talk about enough.
Absolutely not.
And so I decided that I didn't need to feel ashamed of being dyslexic and dyspraxic, and actually in owning our story. I love Brené Brown's work, and as you own your story, it just makes it even more fantastic that you did all of this despite the difficulties that you didn't. And I wonder if I'd have had the labels earlier, would it have given me an excuse to not try?
Wow, that's a very interesting perspective.
Would it have given me an excuse not to try? Whereas having them later, I was also really sad for me, because it was like there was times where my work was ripped up as a child, and I was missed break time because I had to do my handwriting again. And so I was sad for the me that didn't get the support I needed. Had I known earlier, would it have been easier? And maybe it would have done, but yeah,
maybe
I guess
you would have missed out on a whole bunch of resilience as well. Not, it's really, I want to take this back because, I always think this is something, I love talking about hidden gifts in adversity, and this is something for you to discover and for you to claim, but not for me to tell you. So I did not mean any disrespect when I said that, in terms of maybe that gave you
I didn't take any at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I often feel, when we find something, those what I call hidden gifts in adversity, when we unpack them and make them our gifts and really utilize them, that's where the absolute brilliance and beauty lies, within all the adversity. And for us to be able to discover that, and for you to say that, I took it with amusement, and I stood up for myself. This is beautiful. This is so beautiful. This is owning your gifts and standing up for them. And to me, that is really something that I feel everybody is really blessed to discover those gifts in the adversity. And that's what my whole journey is about, helping people to discover their gifts in adversity. And I absolutely love what you do, what you have done with your entire journey, with all your despite and with those difficulties, to grow into the person that you are today is just incredible. Mel, let me ask you, what does your relationship with your twin sister and your sister look like nowadays?
I'm estranged from most of my family. We've had a turbulent relationship, my sister and I, but we are in contact. We're not massively close. We have very different trajectories of life. I chose not to have children and traveled the world. She had children and has a smaller world that she occupies. So there have been clashes. There have been some large clashes, but we're on speaking terms, and so we are in each other's lives, which is really nice.
And that's your twin sister you're talking about?
Yeah. And I have a lovely niece and nephew who are very, very dear to me too. So that's it for me, for family. Lots of and we talk. It's interesting that with yours is about inspiring grief, because there's lots of griefs that we don't talk about, and the hidden griefs of losses that from estrangement rather than death that we live with. And going back to what you're saying about our stories, I think a lot of us don't own our stories, and so we feel like we're not good enough because that's maybe how we've been treated at times. But there's this and I'm aware of it, and it's almost like my brain's like updating as we're talking. Yes, Mel, the brilliance is like trying to kind of shoot out my pocket, that we from these adversities we draw, when we really sit and think about it, there's this incredible strength, isn't there, that we have. And in just telling my story, I'm like, oh, it's just my story. It's ordinary. I'm an ordinary person.
Oh my goodness.
That's what we do, though, isn't it?
Yeah. We normalize it. Because to you, it's the norm now.
Yeah, but because we live it, it feels ordinary. But actually, when we tell it to other people and they reflect back, then we start to own, actually, it's not ordinary. This is quite far from, and there's something extra in the ordinary that makes us do what we do. So I guess the message is, for, I'm aware there might be people listening to this at some point that you may feel that you're not good enough, you're weak because you cry, because you fall apart, but actually we're humans and we're designed to fall apart and be put back together again in the context of supportive relationships, which I didn't have in my at some points in my life. So we have the wrong kind of template for what we're supposed to be. And actually,
I really like that you say
that vulnerability.
I'd love to ask you something about that, Mel, because when you say we have that template and people tend to fall apart and cry and think they're weak, here's my take on that, and I'd really love to hear yours on that. I feel that when it comes to the world of grief, when it comes to losing loved ones, again, you know, there are labels and there's wording, there's language around that. My group is called Loving Life After Loss because this is where I pick people up from. For me, this is really the after loss is basically the station where I pick them up from, and loving life is where I want to get them to. I personally don't refer to it as loss anymore. I don't ever say, or hardly ever, you know, sometimes it slips out and instantly it feels wrong when I say it. I refer to my husband's passing. I don't say when I lost my husband. I say when my husband passed, because it's a neutral statement and not my loss. He passed. It was part of our full contract. That's how I see it today. And I understand everybody's got different faiths, but what I want to get to is there is this template when it comes to grief. Somebody dies, you fall apart, and society pretty much expects that. Society expects of you to fall apart and to stay there for 6 to 12 months and heal through it, and then maybe and hopefully move on. So there is this really weird time frame that society has given that, and some try to put that cookie cutter of the stages of grief on top of it, despite us now knowing the stages of grief were actually always designed by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Is she a doctor? How embarrassing, I should know that. But anyway, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she's the one who came up with those stages of grief, but she never intended them to be stages of grief. They were actually stages for terminally ill people. And people still refer to them as stages of grief, which to me never made sense. I was never in denial. I was never in bargaining phase. I was never in anger. You know, I did not have any of these. When it comes to terminally ill people, I can so much more understand these stages where the bargaining, the denial would come in. So when it comes to this expectation, the templates of how you're supposed to grieve, there's really very little room, if any, for different ways to grieve, for things that we do and offer in Loving Life After Loss, where the focus is on healing. So I always talk about my healing journey, not my grief journey. Grief is what's happening along the way to get to the healing. That's a byproduct that happens anyway, and I allow that to happen. But I feel that with those templates, people actually are more held in their grief rather than encouraged to actually go into healing, because it's not part of the template. It's not part of the templates that the society expects you to go straight into healing. They expect you to stay stuck in grief for a very long time before you potentially allow it to happen. And even then, there's all these byproducts of that template that say, there'll always be a hole in your heart, it'll never get better, grief will always stay with you. I don't believe in any of those statements. I feel they're all just part of the template. I'd love to hear what your take on that is. You work with that a lot as well.
Yeah, I think there are so many different types of grief. There's the grief of death, there's the grief of estrangement, there's anticipated grief of someone dying, whether it's through cancer, whether it's through dementia, or the grief of somebody who's changed and no longer recognizes you. There are all these hidden griefs, and I don't think we just get over it. It lives with us. I think we learn to live with the grief. It lives alongside us. And often it may be dormant in terms of we don't necessarily feel it's overwhelming emotions, but something can take us straight back to that moment in a heartbeat, and so we can have a real swelling up of emotions and feel that loss like it was yesterday. And other times it's not there at all, and we're in our joyful state and we're enjoying life. So I think, you know, actually you're right, people can get stuck in their grief, and there can be a lot of guilt around, I shouldn't be laughing because I've lost somebody, and I'm supposed to be grieving, and I can't have both. I can't let the joy in as well as
being there's a lot of that expectation.
So I think everybody's grief journey is personal to them, and some people, and I think it also sits in with attachments of how we're supported, what we have around us, what we've lived through. and so if you've got a supportive network, they may hold you better, and you may feel that you have other relationships that you can kind of lean on. But if it was just you and a partner and there was no other relationship, not so many relationships around you, or you've experienced significant abandonment in your early life, then that may echo when when I'm looking at how when people come to me with grief. We look at attachments and what's this echoing from previous, our earlier lives. So we're not just experiencing what happens in the moment, but how do we make sense of that? And there'll be layers of context around it. So I think, it's just a word until you've experienced it. It's exhausting, it's devastating, and everybody picks up the pieces in their own space and time. I don't like the word loss, interestingly enough, because
me neither.
When somebody says, "Oh, you lost somebody," no, I didn't lose them. I didn't put them on. I didn't leave them on the bus one day. They died. It's amazing how many people won't use the word "died." They died. They're dead. They died. Or in my case, some of my grief is a living grief, and that sadness. It lives with me. It doesn't go, but it's shrunk enough that the joy sits around it, if you like. Yeah.
Incredible. So, I really like that. I like hearing other people's perspective around that. Mel, I have 2 more questions for you here.
You go for it.
Yeah, because we're almost on the hour now, but I was just listening to you, I get so carried away because it's just really, really incredible. I love that you have taken us on this journey. I'm so grateful for what you have shared with us here. And my 2 questions are, often I come across people, they listen to my talks or they listen to my interviews, they listen to the people that come into the group and share their stories. And sometimes I hear comments like, well, yeah, it's easy for you because you've made it, or you are on the other side, or you've healed, or you have support, or you had, they often are stuck in this can't happen for me. I can't do that. You can, I can't. I don't know how you did this, but I can't. What would you like to say to somebody who's listening to this conversation right now, thinking there's no way I could ever let go of this, or I could ever heal from this, or ever move forward? Because in particular, you working with trauma, there's often a lot of depth to that, where people feel this has been with me for way too long. How could I ever heal or ever move forward? What would you like to say to them?
I think this is quite a big answer, but I've been there. I've been that person that thinks that somebody else has better gifts than I do, that has something that I don't. That deep pain is really hard to move from because it's frightening. Bruce Perry's words speak to me a lot. Sometimes we prefer the certainty of misery than the misery of uncertainty.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. Yes,
it's a really powerful. It's not my words, they're from Dr. Bruce Perry, and it's really hard. It's frightening and it's scary to let go of what we've done to survive. And actually, I talk about this a lot: the surviving to thriving. To let go of what you've always known and not know it. I can only describe it as a metaphor of like you're clinging to the rock face and somebody's saying to you, jump, let go. And you cling on for dear life because it feels like you'll die if you let go. And sometimes the bump isn't as big as you think it is. So the fear lives in our bodies. We talk about face the fear and do it anyway, but I wrote about this on LinkedIn just the other day. Sometimes it's not fear, it's terror, and what we've lived to can make us really frightened. And so our bodies can tell us, it can feel in our bodies like we're going to die if we go on the podcast. We're going to, if we stand up in public and all these eyes come on, our shame comes up to meet us. And so stepping into the vulnerability, sometimes it has to be really gently. The steps need to be the right size for you. and finding people that get you and allow you to take your time and grow at the pace that you can go at. We live in a world that is like face the fear and do it anyway. There's a lot of bullying,
pushing and
coaches,
expectation,
a lot of pushing. And so actually I always thought I wasn't a risk taker. I always thought I was a little bit vulnerable and terrified of the world. But you only need your courage to just tip a little bit more than your fear to tip. You can tiptoe in. You can tiptoe in. You can ask somebody to hold your hands. When I went the first time I read a poem on stage, I took somebody up with me and they stood next to me and held my hand. And that she helped to keep me regulated while I was talking, and I was able to step into that. It's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, because when we get a little bit of like in our bodies, we kind of like, no, I'm not doing that. And so you can't always think your way out of these scary moments. Sometimes you have to feel your way out. You have to know that actually, if I can settle my heart rate down, it can take a long time to be able to manage what's going on in your body, and know that how you're wired may have a lot to do with what you've lived through. So
understanding yourself, that's really beautiful.
Loads.
I love that you say, sorry.
Go on. No, it's okay.
No, I just wanted to highlight that one thing, because it really stood out for me, that you said your courage just have to tip a little bit over the fear. You don't have to completely be courageous and conquer your fears, just that tipping point, where it tips over. I love that. It is so important. Thank you.
And one of the things that also springs to mind as I show up at these things that can be quite vulnerable and exposing is that it's not about me. And that might sound a bit weird, but sometimes when we're running a business or we want to tell our story, we're given there's so much things about, everybody makes bids for connection, whether you're posting your dinner online, whether you're posting a picture of your dog. We're wired for connection, and so everybody makes bids for connection. So we all have a right to belong here. We all have a right to take up space in this world. And so we can get rid of the attention seeking that we've been given, and I'm going to look an idiot. We often have fears of either being too much or not enough, and that can be conflicting, because humans are paradoxical and contradictory.
That's true,
And so what I have learned to do that has helped me is to have a fierce compassion for myself. Kirsten Neff is the compassion lady. Brené Brown is the shame lady. And Kirsten Neff says is, when we have a fierce compassion for ourselves, we really own what we've lived through. We can instead of shaming ourselves because we got it wrong again, we can stay with that. You're trying, you're having a go. And so that ability to be vulnerable and show up, because it's not about me. Yes, my story it may be huge and it may be inspiring, but it's really about all the people out there who don't think they can do it yet. To be able to know that you're already doing it. When I talk to my clients, I say, tell me about your scary moments. The morning you get up out of bed when you just want to die, and you put your makeup on and you take the kids to school. You're doing it. Those are moments of courage and bravery. They're going on when you don't want to.
Absolutely love that.
There's already these moments that you'll have lived through. And so people often have resources that they haven't recognized, but they use.
I so love that you say that. There's one example that I'd also like to bring in here, because this is so aligned with what you just said, that so often I hear from widows saying, and from widows that are moms saying, well, I had no choice, I had to do it for my children. And I'm like, hold on a moment, you had a choice. There are so many people that do fall apart, that do go into mental illness, that do end up sometimes even in mental institutions or on medication, or there are so many other choices you could have taken, but you chose to show up for your children and fight for them. So don't ever tell me you had no other choice. You did choose, and I want you to own that, and so many women don't go like, wow, Yes, and it's really empowering to actually highlight that and to actually show people what they have already done. And I love that you say you already are doing it, but often we don't recognize it because we are so in doing mode, and often we slip into functioning mode. We just show up, we do it, but the just, it is showing up. And for people to recognize that, it's incredible. You know, it's really incredible. It's very empowering when we own that.
We have to remind ourselves that our thoughts aren't always facts, and so what we think isn't what it is a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
I was listening to something, I can't remember who it was, but to stay steadfast in your pain and to give it purpose. And actually, both of us are here because we have pain, and everybody I speak to, and a lot of the people, particularly in the self-employed world, it's their pain that fires up that passion. And so when I say it's not about you, I'm not being horrible to my client at all. I'm letting them know that you have this self-consciousness about being in the world, but actually the people in your world need you. They need your gifts of whatever, you know. And sometimes our own self is the gift, and people go, well, you know, I don't play guitar, or I'm not musical, or I'm rubbish at maths. And your gift is your very presence, that somebody somewhere loves you and needs you. And even
and often all these things stem from comparison, you know. So so what, you're not good at math or not good at guitar, what are you good at? I see that a lot in my two boys. They're so different, you know, and often my older one felt intimidated or you know, not good enough because my little one's highly intelligent. He used to call him Einstein and things like that. I'm like, stop doing that. Everybody's got their own talents. There's no need for comparison or putting one down to, you know, it's really,
we all do it. We all
have our gifts. And
we all do it. We always measure ourselves down. You know, in my worst kind of a critical moment, it's like, you've not done a TED Talk, you've not written several books, you haven't been, you know, on a stage with a keynote speech of 3,000 people, you know, you're a complete it's a failure. But actually, when we go back to our stories and what we've lived through, where we are absolutely growing at our own speed and our own pace. And I wouldn't want to be on a stage of 3,000 people. That's not really where my magic is. My magic is in the, you know, it's why one of the reasons I quit the doctorate. One, it felt like I wasn't enjoying that. I don't want to code data. I'd much rather be with my clients than you know, sticking my head in loads of coding of research. It's, I couldn't think of anything worse.
Speaking about which, Mel, speaking about where your magic is, because we are now past the hour already, and so unfortunately we'll have to wrap this up. I could talk to you for hours. I think there's so
I'm enjoying the conversation too.
Me too. Marie. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for not just being here and your time, but really for sharing your heart so openly with us. I feel really, really blessed that you came here and shared your story with us, that you shared yourself with us. So speaking about your magic, how can people follow you, get in touch with you, learn a bit more about you? You know, do you, I always ask people that come here to be interviewed with me to share their links where people can either follow them or get in touch, and that can be anything, your social media handles, your website. We make sure that we post that in the comments below. Is there anything that you'd like to put out there before we conclude this?
My website is meljriley.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn as Mel Riley Counsellor. I'm on Twitter as MJ Counselling. So yeah, any of those routes will get to me if you have something that you want to say or share. Yeah,
picture perfect. And if you didn't get that, we'll put it in the comments below. So don't worry if you couldn't write that down fast enough.
Yeah, and I just want to also let people know that I am on wait list at the moment for appointments. So there's not a huge amount of space for new clients right now. Yeah.
Mel, I feel really, really blessed that you were here. Thank you so much. I can't believe that this all started with me reading one story on LinkedIn, and now
one that I almost never posted.
Oh my God, I'm so grateful you did.
One that it took a moment of courage. I've watched everybody else post theirs, and I was like, I'm not going to write it as beautifully as that. And
we often don't know who we reach through that. And look, what amazing and beautiful conversation came out of that now. And I'm absolutely certain that it was a lot of inspiration for many people in here. So please
every time we show up, I think we're rewarded.
Absolutely, absolutely. Please share this with anyone who you think can get something out of this, and everybody else watching this, the same for you. I always share because this is obviously live streamed into the group Loving Life After Loss, but we always upload our interviews on YouTube as well, and I'll share the link so it can also be shared outside of the group. So you will all get this link. You can share it. Mel, you can share it if you want to. And I've got nothing left but thanking you from the bottom of my heart for sharing yourself and sharing your story. I really, truly enjoyed our interview. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you, Marie, for the conversation. Much love.
Awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. Have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Bye, lovely people. Thank you, Mel. No, it doesn't let me. There you go.